The Galactic Council chamber hung in space like a massive glass bubble above the neutral world of Nexus Prime. Inside, representatives from 47 different alien civilizations stood on floating platforms arranged in a perfect circle. Some of these beings glowed with strange energy, others had multiple arms or legs, and a few looked like nothing humans had ever imagined in their wildest dreams. On one of the smallest platforms stood Ambassador Michael Harris, representing Earth. He wore a simple dark blue suit that looked almost ridiculous compared to the glowing armor and exotic biological forms around him. His brown hair was neatly combed, and his face remained carefully neutral as he listened to the towering reptilian creature speaking. General Krell of the Vraxian Empire stood nearly 12 feet tall. His body was covered in dark green scales reinforced with metallic implants that gleamed under the chamber's artificial lights. 4 muscular arms gestured dramatically as he addressed the council, and his yellow eyes burned with confidence and barely concealed greed. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Krell's voice boomed through the translation devices everyone wore. The Vraxian Empire formally announces our intention to claim the Sol system. We have conducted extensive surveys and found valuable minerals in the asteroid belt and on several outer planets. The primitive inhabitants currently occupying the third planet will be relocated to appropriate facilities where they can live comfortably under our protection. A ripple of sound moved through the chamber. Most of the alien representatives seemed indifferent to the announcement. A few exchanged knowing glances. Several looked almost amused. Michael felt his stomach tighten, but years of diplomatic training kept his expression calm. He simply stood there, hands clasped loosely behind his back, waiting for his turn to speak. Counselor Thaler, a large insect-like creature with 6 legs and compound eyes that sparkled like jewels, clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. General Krell, the humans have been members of this council for 43 standard cycles. Does the non-aggression charter not protect them from military action? Krell turned his massive head toward her, and his laugh sounded like rocks grinding together. The charter protects civilizations capable of defending themselves, Counselor. Earth possesses no energy shields, no plasma weaponry, no gravitational manipulation technology. Their military forces use kinetic projectile weapons, essentially throwing pieces of metal at high speeds. Their spacecraft rely on controlled chemical explosions for propulsion. They are children playing with toys while adults conduct real business. He turned to face Michael directly. Furthermore, their planetary government is fragmented into nearly 200 separate nations that can barely cooperate on simple trade agreements. They certainly cannot mount a unified military defense. We have observed them carefully. They pose no threat to anyone, least of all the Vraxian Empire. Michael noticed that 2 representatives were watching the exchange with unusual intensity. Ambassador Grace Collins of the ancient Archean race sat forward on her platform, her silver hair and lined face giving her an air of great wisdom. Beside her, Ambassador Thomas Wright of the mysterious Lamari shifted uncomfortably, his blue-tinted skin seeming to darken with worry. The council leader, a being of pure energy called Elder Vornim, pulsed with soft orange light. Ambassador Harris, General Krell has made a formal declaration of intent. You have the floor to respond. Michael took one slow breath, then another. 3 days ago, he had sat in a briefing room deep beneath the Pentagon with General Rebecca Stone and 4 others whose names he was not allowed to know. They had prepared him for exactly this scenario. Stone's final words echoed in his memory, if they threaten us, say exactly what we discussed. Nothing more, nothing less. Members of the Council, Michael began, his voice surprisingly steady, Earth thanks you for the opportunity to address this matter. General Krell has clearly invested considerable resources in surveying our system and studying our capabilities. Krell's chest swelled with pride. Indeed. The Vraxian Empire conducts thorough research before any territorial acquisition. Then I must inform you, Michael continued, meeting the general's yellow eyes without flinching, that you have made a critical error in your assessment. You may want to reconsider this course of action. The words seemed simple enough, but they fell into the chamber like a stone into still water. The casual confidence in Michael's voice, the complete absence of fear or desperation, created ripples of confusion among the assembled aliens. Krell stared at the human for a long moment, then threw his head back and roared with laughter. The sound echoed through the crystal chamber, and several other representatives joined in with their own versions of amusement, clicking, chirping, and buzzing sounds that filled the air. Reconsider? Krell managed to speak through his laughter. Little human, the Vraxian Armada consists of 500 warships, each capable of reducing cities to ash in minutes. We possess technology your species will not develop for 1,000 years. We have conquered 12 star systems. What could you possibly have that would make us reconsider? Michael said nothing. He simply stood there, perfectly still, perfectly calm. His dark eyes held something that made several council members stop laughing. It was not fear or anger. It was patience. The cold, calculating patience of someone who knew something important that others did not. Ambassador Collins leaned forward urgently. Perhaps, General Krell, you should know that Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. The environmental conditions that are irrelevant, Krell interrupted sharply. Death world or paradise, it makes no difference. The humans will surrender or be removed. This discussion is concluded. Admiral David Threx stood on the command deck of the Vraxian flagship Conquest's Edge, and smiled with satisfaction. The massive warship cut through space at faster-than-light speeds, leading a fleet of 500 vessels toward the Sol system. Around him, junior officers monitored glowing displays and called out status reports in excited voices. Admiral, all fleet groups report ready status, announced Commander Lisa Venn, his second-in-command. Estimated arrival at the Sol system in 42 hours. Threx nodded, his forearms crossed over his armored chest. Excellent. Have the intelligence reports been distributed to all ship commanders? Yes, sir. Every captain has reviewed the tactical assessment of Earth's defenses. Threx pulled up a holographic display showing the Sol system. The third planet, Earth, glowed blue and green in the projection. Red markers indicated the locations of human military installations, satellites, and the handful of orbital stations they had managed to construct. Pathetic, muttered one of the younger officers, a warrior named Krell Jr., nephew to the general himself. They have perhaps 200 spacecraft capable of leaving their atmosphere, and most of those are unarmed cargo vessels. Their weapons fire solid projectiles. Solid metal. Like something from the ancient histories. Laughter rippled across the command deck. Threx allowed himself a thin smile but raised one hand for silence. Do not underestimate any opponent, no matter how primitive they appear. That is how empires fall. But even as he said the words, Threx did not truly believe them. The intelligence was overwhelming. Earth had no energy shields protecting their cities. Their military forces were divided among nearly 200 separate nations that spent more time arguing with each other than cooperating. They had nuclear weapons, yes, but those were crude fusion devices that moved slowly enough to be intercepted by basic Vraxian defense systems. The humans had only been in space for barely 200 years. The Vraxian Empire had been traveling between stars for over 3,000 years. It was not even a fair comparison. What the Vraxians did not know, could not know, was the true nature of humanity's journey to this moment. 12,000 years ago, humans had survived an ice age that covered half their planet in glacier miles thick. They had lived in caves, hunted massive beasts with nothing but sharpened stones, and learned to create fire when the world tried to freeze them to death. 5,000 years ago, humans had built vast civilizations only to watch them collapse from war, disease, and natural disasters. Each time, they rebuilt. Each time, they learned. 2,000 years ago, humans had spread across their entire planet, adapting to live in scorching deserts, frozen tundras, steaming jungles, and barren mountains. They had fought wars that killed millions, survived plagues that wiped out entire continents, and kept pushing forward. 66 million years before humans even existed, an asteroid had struck Earth with such force that it killed most life on the planet. But life had survived, adapted, and eventually produced a species clever and stubborn enough to look up at the stars and decide to go there. The Vraxians had studied Earth's current military capabilities. They had counted ships and measured weapons. But they had not studied Earth's history. They had not asked the most important question: what kind of species survives on a planet that constantly tries to kill them? On Earth, deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, General Rebecca Stone stood in a command center carved from solid rock. Dozens of officers worked at computer stations, and enormous screens displayed views of space around the planet and throughout the solar system. General, we've received confirmation, said Colonel James Parker, looking up from his console. The Vraxian fleet will reach the outer solar system in approximately 40 hours. They are following a direct course toward Earth. Are our assets in position? Rebecca asked calmly. Yes. All platforms are online and waiting. The fleet is dispersed according to Plan Titan. Admiral Wilson reports all ships ready. Rebecca nodded slowly, her gray eyes fixed on the main screen showing the path of the approaching Vraxian fleet. Beside her, Colonel Emma Wright pulled up another display. General, these are the defensive positions the Vraxians know about, Emma said, highlighting several red markers in Earth orbit and on the Moon. And these, she pressed another button, and the display exploded with hundreds of new green markers throughout the solar system, are the positions they don't know about. The green markers appeared in the asteroid belt, around Jupiter's moons, near Saturn, and in dozens of locations throughout the outer solar system. Each marker represented weapons platforms, hidden ships, or defense systems that humanity had been quietly building for 80 years. When Earth had made first contact with alien species 8 decades ago, humanity's leaders had made a collective decision. They would join the Galactic Council. They would trade and learn and pretend to be friendly, cooperative members of the galactic community. But they would also prepare for the day when someone decided humans were too weak to defend themselves. Humans had learned long ago that peace was wonderful, but survival required being ready for war. Do the Vraxians really think we've been in space for 200 years and never thought about military applications? Rebecca asked quietly. They think we're primitives, James replied. They see kinetic weapons and chemical rockets and assume we're stupid. Rebecca's smile was cold. Then they're about to learn an important lesson about assumptions. The Vraxian fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, near the orbit of Neptune. 500 warships materialized in perfect formation, their dark hulls bristling with weapon systems that had conquered a dozen worlds. Admiral David Threx stood on his command deck and gazed at the distant sun on the main view screen. All ships, assume attack formation. Send the standard warning to the humans. Inform them they have one final chance to surrender. A small floating device appeared on the screen ahead of them. It was barely larger than a household refrigerator, spinning slowly in the darkness of space. On its side, written in multiple languages including Vraxian, was a simple message: warning. You are entering protected space. Turn back now. Commander Lisa Venn looked at the Admiral with amusement. Sir, the humans have placed a warning buoy. Should we stop and tremble? Laughter echoed across the command deck. Threx allowed himself a smile. Destroy it. Let us show them what we think of their warnings. A single pulse of green energy shot from the flagship's forward cannon. The warning buoy exploded into a shower of sparks and debris. Forward into the system, Threx commanded. Maintain formation and proceed toward the... His words were cut off by an alarm that suddenly shrieked across every console on the command deck. Red warning lights flashed throughout the ship. Multiple contacts, shouted the sensor officer, his voice cracking with surprise. Massive energy signatures activating throughout the asteroid belt. Counting, 50, 100, 200 contacts and rising. What? Threx spun toward the displays. That's impossible. Our scans showed nothing in the asteroid belt except rocks and a few mining stations. On the main screen, the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter suddenly came alive. Hundreds of what appeared to be ordinary asteroids split open like mechanical flowers, revealing hidden weapons platforms inside. Each platform rotated and locked targeting systems onto the Vraxian fleet. Sir, those aren't rocks. Lisa shouted. They're hollowed out and filled with weapons systems. The humans camouflaged military installations as asteroids. Evasive action. Threx roared. All ships scatter and return fire. But he was too late. The human weapons fired. These were not energy beams or plasma bolts like most civilized species used. These were railguns, massive electromagnetic cannons that accelerated chunks of metal to incredible speeds using magnetic force. The projectiles were simple iron slugs wrapped in titanium shells, each weighing several tons and moving at nearly 3% the speed of light. When a railgun slug hit a Vraxian warship, it did not explode. It simply punched through the hull like a bullet through paper, creating a hole 10 feet wide that vented atmosphere, crew, and equipment into space. The kinetic energy transferred into the ship's structure, causing internal systems to shatter and tear apart. The first volley from the asteroid platforms destroyed 18 Vraxian ships in less than 30 seconds. Shields up. Threx screamed, but the shields were designed to deflect energy weapons. The solid metal projectiles simply passed through the energy fields and continued into the hulls. Return fire. Target those platforms. The Vraxian ships began launching their plasma missiles and energy beams at the hidden platforms. Several asteroids exploded in brilliant flashes, but for every platform they destroyed, 2 more seemed to activate. Admiral, we have new contacts, the sensor officer yelled. Fast-moving ships emerging from behind Jupiter. Designate them as human strike craft. On the screen, dozens of smaller human ships appeared. They looked crude compared to Vraxian vessels, angular, ugly things made of steel and titanium rather than the elegant curved hulls of proper warships. But they moved with surprising speed and agility. Captain William Ross piloted the ESS Defiant, one of Earth's newest strike cruisers. His crew of 40 worked frantically at their stations as he guided the ship into attack range. "Target acquired," announced Lieutenant Kate Morris from her weapons console. "Vraxian destroyer, bearing 270. Fire missiles," William ordered calmly. The Defiant launched a spread of nuclear-tipped missiles. The Vraxians had assumed human nuclear weapons were slow and easy to intercept. They were wrong. These missiles used advanced propulsion systems and AI guidance that made them dart and weave through space like living things. 3 missiles struck the destroyer, and the nuclear detonations tore the ship into glowing fragments. "Direct hit. Target destroyed," Kate shouted with fierce satisfaction. But the Vraxians were not helpless. They had superior numbers and powerful weapons. Their return fire caught 2 human ships, reducing them to expanding clouds of debris. Admiral Threx tried to regain control of the situation. "All ships, concentrate fire on Sector 7. Overwhelm their defenses with volume." The Vraxian ships grouped together and poured devastating energy into one section of the asteroid belt. Dozens of human platforms exploded under the assault. Then something happened that made Threx's blood run cold. A human ship, badly damaged and venting atmosphere, suddenly changed course and accelerated directly toward one of the Vraxian carriers. The pilot was deliberately ramming his vessel into the enemy ship. "What is he doing?" Lisa gasped. "That's suicide." The small human ship, barely the size of a Vraxian shuttle, crashed into the carrier at full speed. The impact was insignificant compared to the size of the massive carrier, but the human ship's remaining nuclear missiles detonated on impact. The explosion tore a hole through the carrier's hangar bay, triggering secondary explosions that ripped the ship apart from the inside. As the carrier died, a final transmission came from the human pilot: "Earth stands. Come and take it." Thrax stared at the wreckage in shock. What kind of species deliberately sacrificed themselves like that? In Vraxian culture, retreat and survival were honorable. This was madness. "All ships, fall back to Mars orbit," Thrax commanded, his voice shaking slightly. "We regroup and reassess." The Vraxian fleet retreated, leaving behind the burning wreckage of 53 warships. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so crowded. Every representative from all 47 member species packed onto their platforms, and the normally calm space buzzed with anxious chatter. In the center of the chamber, a massive holographic display showed live footage from the Sol system. Elder Vornim, the energy being who led the council, pulsed with urgent orange light. "Members of the council, we have convened this emergency session to observe the Vraxian military action against Earth. General Krell insisted we witness what he called a simple enforcement action. I believe we are seeing something quite different." On the display, the space near Mars orbit showed the regrouping Vraxian fleet. Of the original 500 warships, fewer than 450 remained operational. Debris fields marked where their ships had died. General Krell stood rigid on his platform, his forearms clenched into fists. His yellow eyes were fixed on the display, and his confident demeanor from 3 days ago had vanished completely. Ambassador Grace Collins of the ancient Archeon race leaned forward, her silver hair gleaming in the chamber's light. "Elder Vornim, I request permission to share historical information that the Council should have heard before this action was authorized." "Speak, Ambassador Collins." Grace's voice was grave. "Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. For those unfamiliar with the classification, this means it is among the most hostile planets in the known galaxy to support intelligent life. The humans evolved under conditions that would kill most of our species within days." Counselor Thaler, the insect-like representative, clicked her mandibles nervously. "Explain what this means, Ambassador Collins." "Earth has extreme temperature variations, deadly weather patterns, and has suffered multiple mass extinction events. An asteroid impact 66 million years ago destroyed most life on the planet. Ice ages have repeatedly covered large portions of the world in glacier. Volcanic eruptions have poisoned the atmosphere. Diseases have killed billions. Yet life survived every catastrophe, adapted, and grew stronger." Ambassador Thomas Wright of the Lumari added his voice. "The humans themselves have survived conditions we cannot imagine. They have fought wars that killed tens of millions of their own kind. They have endured famines, plagues, and natural disasters that should have destroyed them. Every time, they rebuilt. Every time, they learned." On the holographic display, the battle resumed. The Vraxian fleet had launched an assault toward Earth itself, attempting to bypass the asteroid defenses and strike directly at the human homeworld. What happened next made several council members gasp in shock. As the Vraxian ships approached Mars, the red planet's two small moons suddenly split apart. They were not moons at all, but massive military installations disguised to look like natural satellites. Hundreds of missile platforms emerged and began firing at the Vraxian fleet. They weaponized their moons? Krell whispered in disbelief. But that was not all. From Earth's own moon, railgun platforms rose from hidden bunkers and joined the bombardment. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a fortress, and the Vraxians had walked straight into the trap. Admiral David Threx's voice crackled through the communication channels, broadcast for all the council to hear. This is Admiral Threx to Vraxian Command. We are sustaining heavy casualties. Human weapons they are using technologies we banned centuries ago. Nuclear weapons, kinetic bombardment, AI-controlled drone swarms. Request immediate reinforcements. General Krell stepped forward on his platform. Elder Vornim, I formally request Council military assistance. The humans are violating galactic warfare conventions. Ambassador Michael Harris, who had been silent until now, spoke with ice in his voice. We never signed your warfare conventions, General Krell. Earth was not part of the Galactic Council when those treaties were written. We are not bound by rules we never agreed to follow. This is barbarism. Krell roared. You fight without honor. We fight to survive, Michael replied coldly. You brought war to our home. Did you expect us to follow your rules while you tried to exterminate us? You studied our weapons but ignored our history. That was your mistake. On the display, human ships swarmed around the Vraxian fleet like angry hornets. They were smaller, faster, and fought with tactics that seemed insane to the watching aliens. Human pilots would damage a Vraxian ship, draw it away from the fleet, and then lead it into ambush zones where hidden weapons platforms would finish it off. One human destroyer, heavily damaged and clearly doomed, turned and rammed directly into a Vraxian battleship. The collision and subsequent explosion destroyed both vessels. They are mad. Councillor Thaler chittered. They sacrificed themselves deliberately. Grace Collins shook her head sadly. No, Councillor. They are desperate. And a desperate human is the most dangerous creature in the galaxy. They evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. Sacrifice for the survival of their species is written into their very nature. The holographic display showed another horror. The humans had released thousands of small drones, each barely larger than a basketball, that moved with frightening intelligence. The drones attached themselves to Vraxian ships and detonated, targeting engines, weapon systems, and life support. The AI controlling the swarms learned and adapted with each attack, becoming more effective every minute. Ambassador Thomas Wright spoke quietly. I have studied human history extensively. Do you know what they call the period when they fought among themselves with nuclear weapons? They called it mutually assured destruction. They built enough weapons to destroy their own planet dozens of times over, aimed them at each other, and somehow managed not to use them. That level of restraint, combined with that level of destructive capability, should have warned us all. The Vraxian fleet count dropped below 400 ships. 350. 300. General Krell's voice shook with something the Council had never heard from him before, fear. Elder Vornim, the Vraxian Empire withdraws its claim on the Sol system. We request immediate ceasefire negotiations. Michael Harris's response came without hesitation. No. Silence fell across the Council chamber. Ambassador Harris, Elder Vornim pulsed urgently, surely Earth does not wish to continue this bloodshed. Michael's eyes were hard as steel. You gave us 72 hours to surrender or face extinction. We tried diplomacy for 80 years. You brought war to our doorstep. Now you will learn why we stopped fighting each other and started preparing to fight all of you. The Vraxian fleet, now reduced to fewer than 300 ships, made one final desperate decision. Admiral David Threx gathered his remaining forces and ordered a direct assault on Earth itself. If they could threaten the human homeworld directly, perhaps the humans would be forced to negotiate. It was the worst decision he could have made. As the Vraxian ships accelerated toward the blue-green planet, Earth's final defense layer activated. Thousands of orbital platforms that had remained hidden suddenly powered up around the planet like a crown of deadly jewels. These were not simple weapons platforms. These were the result of 80 years of human engineering, paranoia, and determination. General Rebecca Stone stood in the Colorado Command Center, watching the tactical displays with cold satisfaction. Activate the orbital grid. Show them what happens when you threaten our home. Around Earth, in precisely calculated positions, hundreds of weapons platforms began to glow with power. But these were not the railguns or missile systems the Vraxians had already encountered. These were something the humans had kept hidden until this exact moment. "General, all gravitational manipulation platforms are online," reported Colonel James Parker. "We have target locks on the entire Vraxian fleet." Rebecca nodded once. "Fire." The Vraxian ships suddenly lurched sideways as if grabbed by invisible hands. Their sensors screamed warnings about gravitational anomalies. The humans had done the impossible, they had weaponized artificial gravity. Ships that had shields designed to deflect energy weapons and armor built to withstand impacts found themselves being crushed by their own mass as gravity fields intensified around them. Some Vraxian vessels tried to escape, but the gravitational fields held them in place like flies in honey. Admiral Threx stared at his displays in horror. How do they have this technology? Our scientists have been working on gravitational manipulation for 500 years. What Threx did not know was that 73 years ago, an alien probe had crashed in the Canadian wilderness. The Galactic Council had never known about it. The humans had kept it secret, reverse-engineered the technology inside, and spent decades perfecting it. While the rest of the galaxy saw humans as primitives with kinetic weapons, humanity had been quietly mastering the most advanced physics in the known universe. "All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace." Threx commanded desperately. But the gravitational fields prevented even that. The Vraxian ships were trapped. In the Galactic Council chamber, the assembled representatives watched in stunned silence as the human orbital platforms systematically disabled the Vraxian fleet. Ship after ship went dark as their power systems overloaded, trying to compensate for the impossible gravitational forces crushing them. Ambassador Grace Collins spoke softly, "They have surpassed us. A species barely 200 years into space travel has developed technology we have not mastered in millennia." "It is the Death World effect," Ambassador Thomas Wright said quietly. "Humans evolved solving impossible problems. Their entire existence has been about overcoming challenges that should have killed them. They applied that same desperate creativity to surviving in space. The battle, if it could even be called that anymore, lasted only 4 hours. Of the 500 ships that had entered the Sol system with such confidence, only 23 remained functional. The rest were either destroyed or disabled, drifting helplessly in space." Admiral Threx's voice, defeated and broken, broadcast across all frequencies. "This is Admiral David Threx of the Vraxian Empire. We surrender unconditionally. We request mercy and immediate ceasefire." In the council chamber, General Krell stood with all 4 arms hanging limply at his sides. His earlier arrogance had completely vanished, replaced by shock and shame. Elder Vornim pulsed with urgent light. "Ambassador Harris, will Earth accept their surrender?" Michael Harris took a long moment before responding. When he spoke, his voice carried throughout the chamber with absolute authority. "Earth accepts the Vraxian surrender under the following conditions. First, the Vraxian Empire will pay full reparations for this unprovoked attack. Second, all Vraxian military forces will immediately withdraw from the Sol system and will not return without explicit permission from Earth. Third, the Galactic Council will grant Earth full voting rights equal to any other member species." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Fourth, the Council will establish mutual defense treaties with Earth. And fifth, Sol system space is hereby declared a protected zone. Any military vessel entering without permission will be considered an act of war." The silence in the chamber was absolute. No species in Galactic Council history had ever dictated terms from such a position. Usually, new members spent centuries earning respect and privileges. General Krell found his voice, though it was barely a whisper. "The Vraxian Empire accepts these terms." Elder Vornim pulsed slowly, a sign of deep consideration among his species. "The Council recognizes that we have made a grave error in judgment. We saw Earth's peaceful diplomatic approach and mistook it for weakness. We saw their simple weapons and assumed primitive thinking. We did not see the Death World survivors standing before us." Ambassador Collins stood on her platform, her ancient eyes moving across the assembled representatives. "Let me tell you what I have learned from studying Earth. 12,000 years ago, humans lived in caves and hunted with sharpened stones. Today, they have mastered gravitational physics that we barely understand. They accomplished in 12,000 years what took my species 50,000 years. And they did it while fighting themselves, surviving disasters, and overcoming challenges that would have destroyed any of our civilizations." She turned to face Michael directly. Ambassador Harris, the Archeon people formally propose an alliance with Earth. We would be honored to learn from your species. One by one, other representatives began to speak, offering treaties, alliances, and trade agreements. The species that had ignored Earth 3 days ago now competed for humanity's favor. Michael listened to them all, his expression carefully neutral. Finally, he spoke. Earth came to the stars hoping to find friends and allies. We prepared for war but prayed for peace. You forced us to show you our weapons, but understand this, we did not want this. We never wanted this. His voice softened slightly. We will accept your alliances. We will trade and share knowledge. But we will never again be underestimated or threatened. In the Colorado Command Center, General Rebecca Stone watched as the last Vraxian ships limped out of the Sol system. Colonel Emma Wright approached with a datapad. General, intelligence reports that 17 other species were planning similar actions against Earth. All of them have now withdrawn those plans. Rebecca allowed herself a small smile. Good. File this under lessons learned. Never attack a species that evolved on a planet trying to kill them. The Galactic Council added a new designation to their databases that day. Next to Earth's entry appeared a warning in red text that would remain there forever: Deathworld species, do not engage.